Welcome to the Metamorphosis podcast, where we explore the possibilities and processes of personal and community transformation based on the ancient wisdom of Kemet, one of many classical African civilizations, as a foundation. I am Dr. Catherine Lynn Adams, an associate professor of African and African American Studies at Claflin University, where I teach courses on oral and literary traditions of the African world, with an emphasis on interviewing and archiving the stories of our elders. I am serving as a scribe for this project. Joining me is Baba Derrick Jackson. Baba Derrick is the priest and thought leader of Christ Universal Temple, a spiritual community in South Carolina. In this episode, listeners will get a chance to hear Baba Derrick's really skillful approach in using the biblical text to reference and access the earlier texts from Kemet and the principles of Maat. Here is Baba Derrick's remembrance of an earlier teaching on God's prime directive.
God's prime directive. We find it in the 58th chapter of the book of Isaiah. God is in conversation with his people, known as the children of Israel. And the children of Israel were upset because they thought God was not listening to them, right? And they were upset because they kept saying, we've done the rituals, we've made the sacrifice, we are wearing the garment we need to wear to the church, to the temple. And then we're doing all the things we are supposed to do. Why you're not listening? And then God's reply is the most instructive, right? God's reply said, you're not doing what I asked you to do. I don't care about your rituals. I don't care about all that. He said, are you feeding the hungry? Are you clothing the naked? Are you giving a home to the homeless? He said, are you freeing the captive? That's what I want you to do. And then, but God doesn't leave it there. God says in the 58th chapter, around the 12th verse, I'm going to give you the formula on how to do it. Go back and retrieve the ruins of the nation and bring them forward. The Sabaka text. And use them to build what you need to build in order to do what I asked you to do earlier, right? And I tell people, let's now turn to Luke, 4th chapter, start at the 16th verse, and you'll read something about Jesus's first sermon. I know they don't teach you that way, but that was Jesus' first sermon. And in his first sermon given at the temple, he had already had a conversation with the elders. And because his mother comes looking for him, and Mary said, where are you? And he says, I'm with the elders, right? So the elders had already approved of him speaking on that particular Sabbath day, right? And then Jesus stands up. He pulls out the scroll and he folds the scrolls backwards until he got to the book of Isaiah. I say to the audience, Isaiah's been dead over 200 years. Doesn't that make Isaiah an ancestor? Everybody say, yeah, he an ancestor by then. So he went to the book of his ancestors, right? And he started reading from the book of his ancestors, didn't he? Yeah. He started reading from the book of his ancestors. And what did the book of his ancestors say? Free the captive, liberate the oppressed, recover the sight of the blind. Recovery means you saw once at one point, and somehow you lost your sight. So that means losing your vision, losing your consciousness. And then after reading those words from the book of Isaiah, he sat down. And the people said, ain't that Mary boy? What are you doing standing up in the temple? I remember when that brother was sagging nose and walking around with a dirty t-shirt, and now he's standing up in the temple trying to teach people. What was I doing? I was giving people familiarization of what their life is like, but yet at the same time teaching from Maat. Because the book of Kemetic says what? Open the books of your ancestors, read them, and their wise counsel. But I'm not going to tell them that's where I'm coming from. And then let's go to Matthew. And in Matthew, there's a chapter at the 25th, 26th verse. 26th chapter, where he says, I'm going to separate the sheep from the goats. He's saying the sheep are those who do the work I've been doing. The goats are the ones who are not doing the work I've been doing. Right? And he says, so somebody says, well, how are we going to know whether we sheep or a goat? Jesus said, well, you can tell the sheep by who they fed. You can tell the sheep by who did they clothe. You can tell the sheep by have they helped recover the sight of the blind. It's the only time in the entire biblical text where Jesus says, and those who are the goats will wind up in hell. Never mentions hell, no more any other place. So, what is that story telling you? And I left it as a question for the congregation, not for me to answer it. I'm going to tell you, this elder, 80 years old, barely could walk. He walks up to me and he said, young man, and I was scared at that point because I did not want to hurt the elders in the house, right? And he said, young man, you really taught me something today. And I perked up a little bit. He said, you let me know that I am not done. I said, wow. I'm almost about to cry now, just recalling that. He said, all my life, people tried to tell me that I was wrong and I didn't understand things. But I understood every word you said today. And then he said, thank you. turned around, and walked away. In that moment, I knew that my aunt is real. If I never knew it before, in that moment, I knew it was real because I was actually teaching from the book of Kemetic. I was actually teaching from the book of Ankh-Shanki without ever mentioning that that's what I was doing. We don't have to walk away from Christianity. We just have to have the eyes and ears and hands of our ancestors when we read it. And that taught me everything. And from that day on, I was seeing it differently before then, but I was convinced. No. Let me use another stronger word. I was convicted by it.
You remember what year that was?
Ooh, that's a good one. That had to be around 2008, 2009, because I was still working then. And it was just at the time, yeah, it had to be around that time, because it was just at that time when we at the temple was moving away from biblical references to everything we did to just going full scale Kemetic through the Hosea, and then later through the philosophy of the pharaohs by Obinga, then Maat, through Karinga. I mean, we were going full scale through Jan Assman's The Mind of Egypt. I mean, those were the texts I was using at the time to sit with. I wasn't going word for word, but just to sit. What do these three books have in common? That they're saying, they're just saying it differently. And that's where I learned through sitting with it, the why factor of gratitude. I kept hearing that gratitude keep coming back in their ceremony, in their ritual, in the way that we have what is called the declarations of innocence and the reciprocity of the DOV, the declarations of virtue. The declarations of innocence say what I have not done. But the declarations of virtue says this is what I have done. You know, I was always feeling for a long time disconnected by what I have not done. Saying, so there's got to be something that speaks to. And then when I started to see the connection between it, I said, oh, that's it. You don't just stand up and say, I have not done this, I have not done that. But you also got to say, this is what I have done. And when somebody said to me, well, weren't they dead when they said that? I said, think about what you just said. You're taking it again, literally. Ain't no dead people writing their memoir dead. Right? And then they laughed and they said to me, well, I guess you got a point. Because what they have done is what Hootie is reading in the transition. He's not reading just what they announced through their have not. He's reading also what you have done. And when you listen to what they have done, they fed the hungry, they clothed the naked, they gave a boat to the boatless, right? What's that different than what I call God's directive in the biblical text? What our people don't know is where it came from.
And the time frame?
Yes, and the time frame of thousands of years before that. Literally thousands of years before that. Before it's written in there. So you get what I call disjointed information. But if I had not read Christianity before Christ, let me put it this way. If I had not read the pagan origins of the Christ myth, you see where I'm going? God, man, and civilization, I wouldn't have been able to make that connection. If I had not sat with Dr. Ben for 5 hours. So that was the coming together of experience, people, teachings, reading, and then, as you say, sit with it. Right? And then all of a sudden you reading it and you say, that's the same thing. oh, now I have a reference to it, right? And being able to put that information together to say, hey, they may have used some of our information, but as Dr. Gorman would say, they were dropouts. So they didn't get all the information. They didn't finish the course. So Plato only stayed 15 years when you should have stayed 40. Where Pythagoras was the longest, he stayed the longest, he stayed 22. He still should have stayed 40. So now, if I understand that the information they got is limited, then when I'm reading their text, I hear the limitedness in their information.
Thank you, Baba.
Thank you.
We want to archive something special that was established in 2000, more than 2 decades ago. In upcoming episodes, we will be exploring the history of Christ Universal Temple, its teachings on spirituality and personal growth, and its role in the Columbia, South Carolina community. We invite you to like, comment, and subscribe to receive notifications for future episodes. Thank you for listening.